Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Vishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. Good evening, everyone. We are reading from this little booklet called Religion in Practice, and we're reading from the chapter called Love of God by Swami Vivekananda. It's a very short one, so we'll probably read a second one as well. So Atma is a little bit off camera tonight, but we're going to hear him give us the reading of the first paragraph here.
Love of God. We accept God not because we really want him, but because we have need of him for selfish purposes. Love is something absolutely unselfish, that which has no thought beyond the glorification and adoration of the object upon which our affections are bestowed. It is a quality which bows down and worships and asks nothing in return. Merely to love is the sole request that true love has to ask.
Yes, and of course we've probably all experienced times when we have fallen in love with something or someone and we don't really know why. So this is the kind of love that you want. You want that love that isn't a reasoned love. Oh, I like this because, or I like this because I'm going to get something. It's just, you just love it because you love it. It might have been a hobby or a friend or something. And this is the kind of love we want to cultivate for God. And that's really one of the keystones of bhakti yoga and religion, where you're trying to use your natural tendencies of focusing your mind to direct it towards your spiritual life. Love is something that tends to direct our minds in a very strong way. So if you can direct that love towards God, then you've directed it towards your spiritual goal. All right, we have a very long, well, it's not too long. This paragraph isn't too long. Let's go for this.
It is said of a Hindu saint that when she was married, she said to her husband, the king, that she was already married. Well, to whom? Asked the king. To God, was the reply. She went among the poor and the needy and taught the doctrine of extreme love for God. One of her prayers is significant, showing the manner in which her heart was moved. I ask not for wealth. I ask not for position. I ask not for salvation. Oh, place me in 100 hells, if it be thy wish. But let me continue to regard thee as my love. The early language abounds in beautiful prayers of this woman. When her end came, she entered into samadhi on the banks of a river. She composed a beautiful song in which she stated that she was going to meet her beloved.
Yes, exactly the kind of attitude we all want to try to cultivate, those of us practicing bhakti yoga. And of course, even if you're not exclusively a bhakti yoga, it's always good to try to incorporate a bit of bhakti yoga along with the other yogas, so that if you're doing karma yoga, you have a beloved to dedicate the work to. If you're practicing Raja Yoga, you have a beloved to concentrate your meditation on. All right, let's go on.
Men are capable of philosophical analysis of religion. A woman is devotional by nature and loves God from the heart and soul and not from the mind. The Songs of Solomon are one of the most beautiful parts of the Bible. The language in them is much of that affectionate kind which is found in the prayers of the Hindu woman saint. Yet I've heard that Christians are going to have these incomparable songs removed. I've heard an explanation of the songs in which it is said that Solomon loved a young girl and desired her to return his royal affection. The girl, however, loved the young man. It did not want to have anything to do with Solomon. This explanation is excellent to some people because they cannot understand such wondrous love of God for God as embodied in the songs. Love for God in India is different from love for God elsewhere. Because when you get into a country where the thermometer reads 40 degrees below zero, the temperament of the people changes. The aspirations of the people in the climate where the books of the Bible are said to have been written were different from the aspirations of the cold-blooded Western nations, who are more apt to worship the almighty dollar with the warmth expressed in the songs than to worship God. Love for God seems to be based upon a basis of, well, what can I get out of it? In their prayers, they ask for all kinds of selfish things.
Climate does affect people's temperaments, that's for sure. And the harsher the climate, the more your energies go towards survival. In the warmer areas where food is plentiful and easy to grow and get, and then you have a little bit more free time, and so things do tend to be easier, gives you more time for spiritual things. And of course, I just lost my train of thought, but anyway, sorry, just lost the train of thought. All right, let's go on and read the next paragraph. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe the train will come back into town here.
Christians are always wanting God to give them something. They appear as beggars before the throne of the Almighty. A story is told of a beggar who appeared to an emperor for alms. While he was waiting, it was time for the emperor to offer up some prayers. The emperor prayed, "Oh God, give me more wealth, give me more power, give me a greater empire." The beggar started to leave. The emperor turned and asked him, "Where are you going?" "I do not beg of beggars," was his reply.
Yeah, I can now remember what I was going to say. The more physical difficulties you have, the more you're apt to pray for relief from those difficulties. So many times religion started by trying to propitiate the forces of nature, so that you didn't have as either too much rain or too much cold or too much of some other natural disaster or phenomenon that would make it difficult for you to survive. And religions often incorporated all of these kinds of things. And then, of course, the various forces of nature were deified. So if you did need more rain, you would pray to the rain god. You pray to the deity that would give you crops and so forth. So, and of course, this all was tied into the seasons too. And the fact that the sun was getting into longer days during the summer and shorter days into the winter and so forth. And so then we have all sorts of religious festivals around climate changes during the seasonal year. But those are the practical things which are incorporated into religions. But the essential thing for a spiritual aspirant is to cultivate that love of God that is for love's sake. All right, we only have one more little paragraph here.
Some people find it difficult to understand the frenzy of religious fervor, which moved the heart of Mohammed. He would grovel in the dust and writhe in agony. Holy men who have experienced these extreme emotions have been called epileptic. The absence of the thought of self is the essential characteristic of the love for God. Religion nowadays has become a mere hobby and a fashion. People go to church like a flock of sheep. They do not embrace God because they need Him. Most persons are unconscious atheists who self-complacently think that they are devout believers.
That's a little less difficult now than it was even when I was a kid. When I was a kid, it was certainly the fashion to go to church on Sunday. And if you didn't go to church on Sunday, then it was just not as socially acceptable. And so most people went to church on Sunday. And they even had 2 services. So if you wanted to go early, you could. And if you wanted to go later, you could. But of course, many people found that was not very satisfactory because the churches were not teaching really in-depth religion as much as they should have. Many of them were becoming more socially oriented, which is fine. It's fine to have social goals, but that shouldn't be the only goal. And the reason for doing social service has to be related to your spiritual life and doing it in this sense of karma yoga and devotion to a supreme being. So these things tended to be lacking, and they became a little bit too socially oriented and not as in-depth religiously. Now, of course, there were some different Christian traditions that were very serious and did a lot of Bible study and prayer and that sort of thing. And so they had that depth of prayer. But again, prayer often ends up kind of going into give me this or give me that, or forgive me for this and forgive me for that. Especially in a sort of fear-based, sin-based type of philosophy, that tends to dominate how people are praying. So this idea of simply loving God for God's sake was not always that predominant. However, the Crystal Cathedral minister, what was his name, Schuler, I think, he started promoting the idea of God as the loving shepherd. And of course, the proof is in the pudding. People flocked to his church. People liked that message that God was a loving shepherd, that it wasn't a damnation and fear type based religion, but a religion based on loving the good shepherd and loving the Savior. And of course, that's another aspect of Christianity that is very important, is loving Jesus because he saved you. And just as you would love anyone that saved you in this worldly life, you love Jesus because he saves you for all eternity. So that's a very strong love component that you'd find in Christianity. But we did find when I was coming here as a kid, many of the people coming to Vedanta were coming for a spiritual practice that had a practice, had a more in-depth practice than simply Bible study. And when they found meditation practice, they found that very rewarding. And of course, it also wasn't fear-based. It wasn't based on the idea that you're a sinner, but exactly the opposite, that your true nature is divine. And people found that extremely refreshing. All right, so our next one is, what is true self-surrender? And this is by Saradananda. So I don't know if we have to get all our white flags out and surrender here. Let's see.
What is true self-surrender? After Girish Chandra Ghosh had visited the master several times, he one day surrendered himself absolutely to him. Surrendered himself absolutely to him and said, "What shall I do henceforth?" The master replied, "Go on with what you've been doing till now. Try to keep to both sides of life, God and the world. We shall see what is to be done when one side crumbles down. But try to recollect and contemplate on the Lord every morning and evening."
Yeah, this is something that we find with other spiritual teachers too, that they'll often be able to see into people's souls, you could say, and see what kind of life they need to live. And of course, in Girish's case, Ramakrishna knew that his ability to act and inspire people with his acting was very important. And in spite of his rather bizarre lifestyle, you could say, for a spiritual aspirant, that in spite of that, he was going to be a key player in bringing people to Sri Ramakrishna, and that his life would be completely transformed. There was a case of that I can remember here at the Vedanta Society of a young man that was thinking about what he should do in life. He was probably around 20 or so, and he had an absolutely gorgeous voice. And Swami Prabhupada asked him to sing, and he said, "Oh, I don't have anything to sing that's spiritual." And they said, "Well, what do you have?" And he says, "Well, I have Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life." He says, "Well, sing that with a spiritual attitude, like you're singing it to God." And so we did. And he went on and sang 26,000 performances in Las Vegas, and was a long time devotee. So if you have the stamina to do it, you can actually live in the world and still live a spiritual life. It's not as easy. It's easier when you have a nice fence around you, but some people still manage it. He lived a very spiritual life. All right, let's read the next paragraph.
So after Girish Ghosh decided to surrender, he asked for some instructions from the master, and the master didn't say much. But then he said, "Try to recollect and contemplate on the Lord every morning and evening." But on hearing this, Girish said to himself, "Such is the nature of my work that I have no fixed hours, even for a bath or food and sleep. I'm sure I shall forget to contemplate on the Lord every morning and evening, and, well, that'll be very bad. For it's a great sin to transgress the commands of the Guru. Well, how then can I accept this injunction? It's a sin not to act upon to one's promise, even to an ordinary man, but how much more sinful it would be not to be true to one whom I've accepted as my guide to the eternal." But though Girish thought this way, he found it hard to speak out, for he was conscious that the master had not asked him to do anything very difficult. Yet he could not forget the extremely restless condition of his mind, and know that even short spiritual practices were impossible for him. Besides, he'd always found his nature against routine work and hard and fast rules, so he therefore remained silent.
This is, of course, a problem for all of us. It's even if we're not living the life of a bohemian actor in Bengal, trying to keep to a routine. It doesn't always, we think we've got a nice routine going, and then some major event happens in our life, and the whole routine changes, and all of a sudden you've got completely new responsibilities, or a lot of extra responsibilities. and trying to fit everything in becomes very difficult. So that's something we all have to watch out. That we can, I'm sure we can all look back on times when suddenly we realize that we haven't been doing all of our practices that we're supposed to be doing. What happened? And so we have to constantly monitor ourselves. Now, most people would have thought this was a very easy injunction. In fact, there are some stories in the scriptures about a farmer who didn't have any time much for spiritual practices, but he prayed morning and evening and dedicated his the work that he was going to do in the morning and dedicated the work he did in the evening, and that was a sufficient spiritual practice for him. And so, and that's a good spiritual practice for many of us, even if we have little time to do much else, if you can at least do that. And most of us do have at least enough regularity that we can do that, unless you're working on shift work or something of that nature where your schedule is constantly moving around, or you have family commitments that change all the time. But to the best of our ability, most of us do at least get up in the morning and go to bed at some point or other, at least go to bed at some point and get up at some point, and you can do this kind of prayer at the morning and evening junction. All right, let's go on. A couple of small paragraphs here.
So after Ramakrishna asked him to do something very simple, he remained silent. At this, the master looked at Girish, and having divined his mind, said, "Well, if you cannot do this, remember the Lord once before meals and sleep." Girish still remained silent. He was not sure that he was capable of even this. There were no fixed times for his meals, and sometimes it had so happened that in the pressure of world affairs, he had gone through his meals quite unconsciously. So who could say that there would not be any more occasions of such forgetfulness? So Girish remained silent and filled with fear and despair. The master looked at Girish and said smilingly, "Oh, you will plead that you cannot do even this? Oh, very well then. Give me the power of attorney." And the master was now in an exalted, semi-conscious state.
Go ahead and read the footnote, I guess.
This was indeed after the heart of Girish. He felt a great peace within.
Oh, do you have the footnote there in the Kindle?
No.
I'll read the footnote. It's
Okay.
kind of tiny. The power of attorney is a formal instrument by which one person authorizes another to do some act or acts for him. By this expression, Sri Ramakrishna indicated that henceforth he, Sri Ramakrishna, would do on behalf of Girish all that was necessary for the latter's spiritual improvement. Now, just to give you an idea of what kind of life Girish led, it's said that he could dictate several plays simultaneously to different writers. So he might have 2 or 3 different scripts in mind, and he would go from scribe to scribe, telling them the next line for that play. So somehow he could keep the plots straight in his own head and know who to tell what next line to. And then as they were busily copying those down, he would go on to the next one and then on to the next one. So he had an exceptional mind, but it was extremely busy and extremely torn between all sorts of things. And then, of course, he was memorizing his own lines for his next play when he was going on to act. So he did have a lot on his mind, and he, of course, had to keep late hours working at the theater. And like many of us in Hollywood are familiar with people that are in the industry, and it's hurry up and wait is one expression they use, and then they They work people to death for a few weeks, and then you don't have anything to do. So your schedule is very chaotic. You have weeks when you've got 16-hour days, and then you've got weeks where you have nothing to do. And so people have to keep constantly adjusting their schedules to this kind of lifestyle. Even my father in the cartoon industry ran into that a little bit, because there was no stage work, obviously, but the sponsors would be so slow in getting around to sponsoring a series that by the time they did, they only had a few months to get the first episodes on the air for September. And so everybody was working around the clock to try to get everything done. So that's just the nature of this kind of entertainment business that Girish was a part of in Bengal, basically. And so you can imagine how hectic his schedule was, and some of you out there in Hollywood land can probably relate to that. All right, let's continue with the paragraph now.
So Ramakrishna now has asked Girish to give him the power of attorney. And this indeed was after the heart of Girish. He felt a great peace within, and the thought of the great compassion inspired him with a great love for the Master. He said to himself, oh, that it was very well he did not bind himself down to any rules, for now it was enough if he firmly believed that the Master would redeem him by his divine powers. The giving of this spiritual power of attorney then meant only this much to Girish, that he would not have to strive or practice sadhana himself to be rid of his evil tendencies, and that the Master himself would accomplish this by his own power. But he then did not realize that though intolerant of the bondage of discipline and unwilling to submit to it, he had yet freely embraced 100-fold stronger bondage of love. He did not, and he could not realize that henceforth he had only to be patient and passive under all circumstances, whether fame came or ill fame, good or evil, joy or sorrow. Now he was conscious only of the infinite kindness of Sri Ramakrishna, and was immensely proud that the Master had granted him protection. Whatever may think of me, he thought within himself, however they may hate me, he, Sri Ramakrishna, was always under all circumstances mine. So what do I care for others? He was not aware that such pride, rare and auspicious to men, was considered a sadhana in the Bhakti Shastras. He constantly indulged in the happy thought that Sri Ramakrishna had taken all his responsibilities, and that made him continually meditate on Sri Ramakrishna, which gradually brought about fundamental changes in his thoughts and actions. Now, it's true Girish was not conscious of this change, but he was quite happy at the thought that Sri Ramakrishna loved him and was his very own.
Yeah, so that's really the secret of Bhakti Yoga right there, that Girish was constantly thinking of Sri Ramakrishna. So if you can find some way that you can continually think of your Ishtadevata, your chosen ideal, then that's the essence of Bhakti Yoga. That you've got to find some hook, you could say. Of course, some people remind themselves with pictures, some remind themselves with favorite sayings, some remind themselves with favorite songs. And of course, having a meditation practice and doing japa and repeating the name keeps the thought of the chosen ideal always going around in your head. All right, let's go on.
The Master always taught that no one's mental outlook should ever be disturbed. And he always acted up to this principle in his relation with his disciples. Having therefore created the attitude of self-surrender in Girish, the master henceforth trained him accordingly. One day hearing Girish say, "Now let's see, I shall do this," in a certain trifling connection, the master explained, "How's this? Why do you say, 'I shall do this'? Why, suppose you fail to do it? You should say, 'God willing, I shall do this.'" Well, Girish understood. "Quite right," he said to himself. "Since I've fully surrendered my responsibilities to the Lord, and he also has accepted them, I can do a certain thing only if he thinks it should be done by me and is to my benefit and allows me to do it. How can I hope to do it with my own power?" Thenceforth, Girish tried to give up speaking and thinking in this positive, egotistic way.
Of course, we just came through the Durga Puja season, and when you look at the hymns from the Chandi and the devotional attitude towards the Divine Mother, it's much the same thing. It's seeing the Divine Mother, the Shakti power, as doing everything. You're not doing anything. It's the Shakti acting through you that is actually doing it. All power is coming from the Divine Mother. Doesn't matter if you think of it as the Divine Mother or as your Ishta Devata, your chosen ideal. Just some sort of God figure is the source of your power. And whether it's masculine or feminine, it doesn't matter. But that is the source of the power. Because ultimately, of course, Brahman and Shakti are one. And so it doesn't matter which way you look at it. You can look at it from either angle. And by surrendering yourself to that power, it really is more simply recognizing that it was doing everything to begin with. You didn't really have to change from not doing anything to or from doing everything to allowing God to do everything. God has always been doing everything. It's just you're recognizing that God is doing everything is the difference. All right, let's go on here.
And thus days and years passed. In course of time, Sri Ramakrishna passed away. Girish lost his wife and his son. But through all these, his mind held to the thought that these sufferings were because the Master had thought them best for him. The Master had taken his burden, and it was for the Master to decide and do what was to his best interests. Girish had no right to oppose or chafe at them. And thus he came to feel with the passing of days the true significance of self-surrender. Has he even now fully fathomed its meaning? When Girish is questioned, he says, "Oh, much yet remains to be known. Did I then perceive that self-surrender meant so much? Now I find that ordinary sadhana has an end sometime. But this business of self-surrender has no end. One has to continuously scrutinize and see whether even the minutest thought and action are actuated by the power of the Lord or by one's own wretched ego."
And of course, Sri Ramakrishna used to always remind us that the ego is the biggest obstacle we have to our spiritual realization, and that we have to get through that sense of egotism, which of course is what says I'm the doer. So you want to cultivate this idea that I'm not the doer, that the Lord is acting through me. And so this is exactly what Girish was able to do by giving Sri Ramakrishna the power of attorney. All right, let's go on.
This reminds us that Jesus, Chaitanya, and other great sages also granted their redeeming protection, thus to some individuals. Ordinary teachers or saints have not the power to do this, or they can at best teach a few mantras or practices by which they themselves have achieved spiritual progress. Or they may, by leading a pure life, attract others to the ideal of purity. But when men feel themselves helpless amidst the infinite bondages of the world and despair of carrying out the injunctions given for their salvation and cry out, "Oh, we cannot do these. Oh, give us the power to do them." And the ordinary guru is of no avail. It is beyond the power of one man to say to another, "I take the responsibility of your sins, and I shall suffer for them on your behalf." Whenever there is decay of religion in the human heart, the Lord in His infinite mercy is born as a man and suffers for man's sins and releases him from the bondages of the world. He does not, however, allow him to go absolutely free. He makes him strive a little for his education. As Ramakrishna said, the grace of the avatars, men work out 10 lives karma in one life. And this is true as much of races as of individuals. This indeed is described in the Gita as the gift of divine vision to Arjuna. The Puranas as divine mercy. The Vaishnava literature as the salvation of Jagai and Madai, or as the subjugation of the wicked. And in Christianity as the vicarious atonement of Jesus. Without the proof of Sri Ramakrishna's life, we could scarcely have believed in its truth.
And of course, this time we have both Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother as exemplars of this type of power, where they can take on people's karma and release them from all of the past bondages. And of course, in that previous paragraph, I meant to also mention that this is a wonderful attitude to cultivate. So whenever a difficult situation arises, you have to think, well, what is it I'm supposed to be learning from this? And how can I turn this into a spiritual plus for me, that I can find some spiritual meaning in this? How can I use this to lessen my ego? A lot of times difficulties come because our ego is fighting against some sort of circumstance. And so if we can say, oh, okay, well, it's a good chance for my ego to get a little crushed here. That's probably a good thing. And so by looking at different problems in our life, we can get a better handle of things. We can go through the difficulties without so much torment. And that's really the idea. Not that you're never going to have moments where you feel despondent and despair and troubled, but you'll get over them a lot faster when you can cultivate these attitudes and remember the Lord as somehow putting these obstacles in your way for a particular reason. You might not understand what the reason is, but you can pray to understand it and hope that you will learn what lesson it is you need to learn. But again, getting back to Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna, we have these two great exemplars now. And amazingly how neither one of them were from the scholarly realm, unlike, say, Chaitanya or Shankara, who were both great pundits and scholars. Chaitanya is not normally known for that, but he actually was. He was a great pundit before he became a great devotee. But Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother were were not formally educated, but it was obvious that they had inner realization which went beyond any kind of book learning that one could hope for. And they knew the essence of the scriptures without having studied the scriptures in depth. Now, of course, Ramakrishna had many scriptures read to him, or he would hear them being read. And so he had that advantage. But Holy Mother's life was one of great simplicity and practicality, which is something that so many of us can relate to because we're all having to live very practical lives. So, well, let's read one more paragraph and then we'll save the rest for next time.
It may seem that self-surrender is an ordinary action and is easily done. Man is enslaved by his desires and seeks for advantage even in spiritual life. He wants to have worldly pleasure and divine joy simultaneously. To him, the pleasures of the world appear so sweet and delectable. The very thought of their renunciation fills him with a sense of dreadful emptiness. Oh, what will he live for then? Therefore, when he is told that the power of attorney can be given also in spiritual life, he ecstatically thinks that he's at last found out the right thing. Well, let me, so he thinks, live my life with its iniquities and immoralities, and enjoy the pleasures of the world. And let Sri Chaitanya, Jesus, or Sri Ramakrishna look after my prospects in the other world. He does not feel that it is nothing but wicked self-deception. He willfully blinds himself to these evil doings, lest their terrific faces should frighten him, and rushes headlong towards destruction. But one day his eyes shall be uncovered, and will find himself tossed on tempestuous billows in a shoreless ocean, and he will feel that his power of attorney has not been accepted by anyone.
So now one good practice is the desires that aren't quite so disastrous, you could say. If you can turn those desires towards your spiritual practice, then that's a great benefit. So whatever it is you find yourself liking to do, try to do that for your spiritual practice. So if you like to cook, then cook for the Lord. If you like to garden, then grow flowers for the Lord. If you like to paint, then paint pictures of holy people. If you like drama, then write spiritual dramas. If you like to act in spiritual dramas. So this is sort of the Tai Chi of spiritual practice. You take what would normally be a distraction and your enemy in spiritual life, and you turn it around and use that to your own advantage. That's what martial arts do. They use the strength of your opponent to your advantage. So try to turn the things that your ego seems to be enchanted with, and figure out a way to direct that as a spiritual practice. All right, well, let's close with a chant, and we'll finish up the last bit of this one next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om peace, peace, peace. Yeah.